Day. We appreciate your time in coming this evening to our first flood symposium. My name is Joe Lasella. I'm the Emergency Management Director for the town of Greenwich, and I'm very blessed and happy to be here with all of you. I want to thank my colleagues from around the town and our different community agencies and partners that came here tonight to be part of tonight's event. We are excited to share with you some information from a lot of great organizations and key stakeholders from around town. I've been here in town for about just over a year, about 15 months in this role. Some of you may have taken different types of programs and classes. If you haven't already, please follow our Greenwich Alerts page. We have a lot of different classes and different types of events that are coming up this year. We're excited to do a number of different programs for you. Tomorrow we actually have a hurricane awareness course that we put out there a number of months ago, and we have a full house for that tomorrow, and that's going to be virtual and online. So we'll be doing these types of programs throughout the course of the year. I'd first like to introduce our first selectman, Fred Camillo, if he'd like to come up and say a few words.
Thanks, Joe.
Absolutely.
Good evening, everybody. Sorry, there's 4 events at one time tonight. But this is something we take very seriously. As I mentioned to everybody, when I speak with mayors and first selectmen in other towns across Connecticut, this is one of 5 or 6 issues that comes up in every single town. And the reason is that well, there's 2 reasons. One is our infrastructure is outdated. Every infrastructure is around over 100 years old in every town. And also the storms are becoming more and more frequent. And I guess there's a third issue. I think we've overbuilt. I think every town has. And so that's the reason why we fight all the mandates from Hartford that take up soil and replace it with concrete. And Joe has just been a godsend to our town. He's been a tremendous emergency operations director. He's hard at work every day. He's constantly in touch with me on a daily basis. I know sometimes you may get a lot of emails from us when there's a pending storm, but we'd rather be a little bit on the heavy side with those than silent. But this is just something tonight just to let us know what we can do on our own. Obviously, if there's 9 inches in 9 hours like in Super Ida, you're not going to be able to stop it. But certainly, there are some things we can do. In addition, as you know, if you have the wherewithal to raise up your houses, that's fine. But most people don't. So there's little things that we can do to prepare. And I want to again thank Joe and everybody else that's put this together. So Joe, all yours.
Thank you very much.
And thank you.
Just step there.
Thank you.
All right. Well, I'm very excited to kind of announce our first speaker tonight. Our first speaker is Nelson Vaz. He is actually a member of our emergency management team. He is actually one of our meteorologists with the National Weather Center out of New York. Nelson and his team have been a very important part of our emergency management team here in town. Nelson's team actively monitors the weather and gives us good indication and forecasts many days before events happen. And throughout the course of events, especially like last week with the potential of a hurricane coming up the coast, his team was hard at work monitoring these storms throughout the day and night and sending information directly to the emergency management directors. As I get this information, I'm now able to share it to our public works teams, our police departments, our fire departments, our key stakeholders, who then can start taking preparations for any potential impact the storm may provide. So I'm very blessed. I'm very happy to have met Nelson and his team. So I'd like to turn it over to Nelson so he can talk a little bit about the National Weather Service and flooding. Nelson, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Joe. I appreciate that introduction, and it's a pleasure to be able to talk and at events like this, and definitely these partnerships that we have, with Greenwich, with the emergency management. I met Joe at a flood workshop, Connecticut flood workshop, but learned about some of the efforts and that they're taking in Greenwich, and some of his efforts to kind of learn more about some of the hazards and impacts, and really kind of diving more into the vulnerabilities in Greenwich. I think you guys should be feel confident in terms of what your emergency managers are doing, and I think in terms of the partnership that we can build is where we can provide, our role in terms of providing, basically, those timely and accurate weather information, forecast warnings, and really our core partner, these are available to all the public, but really our core partners are our emergency management officials, and, really kind of knowing what are the vulnerabilities, the thresholds for concern, timelines for concern, and action and preparedness. And so us getting a better understanding of what, the vulnerabilities are in Greenwich, we're able to provide better information to Joe and Selectman Camillo, and which in turn helps them make better decisions to protect the community. So Joe gave me an opportunity to share a little bit about let's see here. Joe, I think one thing it does say the participant screen sharing is disabled. I should have checked this before.
Okay.
But Joe gave me a little opportunity to kind of share a little bit about what we do, and especially in the realm of flooding. Really kind of the two big concerns for us for the Greenwich area are flash flooding. Flooding from and the selectmen talked about Ida. So we can see it really in kind of a few ways. It could be either through through tropical systems, and which Ida was. It was a tropical system, but it was also kind of combined with some of what we see with summertime convection, that type of instability. So it really allowed for really a more amplified tropical type storm. But tropical systems which can drop heavy amounts of rain over a day, those are of course definitely hazards that we are concerned about in this area. But other ones are flash flooding. Flash flooding can occur just from thunderstorms. Could be numerous thunderstorms moving over the same area. And one of the vulnerabilities, especially in Greenwich, is because you have suburban, kind of suburban infrastructure, but you also have a lot of flashy creeks and small streams, and also your location close to the water. The other concern being, besides the flooding from overland freshwater flooding, is the coastal flooding, being susceptible right along the coast from Long Island Sound. Let me see here. I'm not sure. Oh, there we go. I think we got it working here. So let me just share my screen quick here. And are you able? So hopefully you guys are able to see.
Yep, we can see it. That's perfect.
Okay, the big screen here. All right, perfect. So just to kind of key in a little bit more on what makes the flooding aspect such a danger, and this is looking at the entire tri-state area. But if you can kind of see here, these are the over the last 15 years, what are the top reasons for weather-related fatalities in our area? Heat is number one, but you see number two is storm surge and coastal flooding. Over the last 15 years, you probably imagine this, what storm caused this. This was due to Sandy, over 40 fatalities in our tri-state area. And then you can see the other big, reason for the fatalities in our area over all the 15 years due to weather-related is flooding. And this was mainly due to Ida, but also we had fatalities from Irene. And basically excessive rainfall, overwhelming storm drainages, and you probably saw what happened in New York City. So fortunately, not as much in southwestern Connecticut, but even northeastern New Jersey, overflowing of really quick responding small rivers, streams. And the thing is, in southwestern Connecticut, in Greenwich, you do have these small creek streams that are also a vulnerability. So that kind of just accentuates what Selectman was saying in terms of water. Water is actually 80% of you look at tropical storms. 80% of fatalities are due to water, either storm surge or to freshwater flooding. And every year, freshwater flooding is one of the leading killers, unfortunately, one of the leading hazards. So to first kind of, step back and take a look at coastal flooding, what makes us so vulnerable is, especially in Greenwich, is the Long Island Sound. We get the right wind direction, and it's really the wind direction and the wind duration and the speed. We get these northeasterly winds that, especially funneling right down the Sound, in combination of wave action and piling of water in western side of the Sound, and us, Greenwich being all the way down here, on kind of the closer to the western tip, where it's almost, it is almost like water is trying to be funneled right through the East River. That's really the primary stressor for Greenwich to be such a vulnerable area. But on top of this wave action, we can get 8-10 feet of waves if you get strong, 30-40 mile per hour winds coming right down the Sound. So that, on top of that wave action, just even increases that coastal flooding threat. And then the other thing is, all these things are not separate. If we get freshwater rainfall, so heavy rainfall when we have elevated tides, that's another concern for us, because that's already kind of taking that storm drainage system, which, as the selectman said, it could be 100 years old, already maybe underbuilt for where today's infrastructure is, and then you're already filling it up with water, underground where it can't hold as much. That's certainly a big issue. So we do issue, and I'll talk briefly about our flash flood products as well. But it's really, in terms of the forecast information, really the best way we can get some information out is through our watch warning process. Watches mean that there's potential for hazardous, significant threat to life and property from an event, whether it be coastal flooding or it could be from freshwater flooding, say in the next 36, 48 hours. So, when we issue those watches, we want you to pay attention to that and prepare that there potentially could be a life-threatening flooding event. And when we issue warnings, coastal flood warnings, that means the next 24, 36 hours, there is a high probability of seeing water levels rise to a point where you're going to see, a threat not only to property, but potentially could even be a threat to life if it gets high enough and you put yourself in harm's way. Fortunately, if we don't see, they're very rare, these coastal flooding events that are, life-threatening, but especially with tropical systems, we could see it, and really in the highest end nor'easters. We do have, and Joe will share some of the information. You can take a look. We have a web page. We provide a lot of information in terms of water level forecasts, observations, the hazard alerts we're providing, and even flood inundation maps. Those things like, you can see the vulnerabilities in our area. I think some really important information you'd like. We provide point forecasts in terms of what is the water level going to be at the next tidal, next few tidal cycles. We have impact catalogs, so you can actually see, all right, what's happened with previous events where you got to a certain water level. We have a couple of tidal gauge in our area, Stamford and Bridgeport, that we forecast for, and based on those forecasts, how high the water level is, we can give you information through these inundation maps and also impact catalogs. What are the impacts going to be? So it's something that helps us, having that knowledge. We get information from Joe and the team, and then to be able to relay that back. All right, we think water levels are going to get this high. This is what what previous impacts have occurred at those water levels. And then the other thing, I'll just just a couple more minutes in terms of the causes of the freshwater flooding. On the other, instead of looking at the Sound, we're looking at, in terms of how much rainfall can fall, how quickly, over how large, an area, and then for how long. It's really, that's what's caused the flooding. And really, high something like what we saw with Ida, high precipitation rates across the whole, county of Fairfield, especially all of Greenwich, for not necessarily that long a duration, but for, maybe 3-4 inches an hour. That's going to overwhelm everything. And, there's certain events that, no matter how much you mitigate, it's going to be hard to prevent things. But where if we can provide, some kind of heads up, I think that's at least, get to higher ground, or even potentially with enough heads up, and enough knowledge of the area, perhaps even evacuations ahead of time. Big thing about, Greenwich area is suburban, old, and a lot of our area, older storm drainage infrastructure, and then a lot of flashy streams and creeks. So it's either thunderstorm activity. This was an example from September of 2018. We had, thunderstorm activity along a stationary boundary. A lot of, rainfall rates of 2-3 inches an hour over several hours. And this was actually close to we consider a 1,000-year event, or a 0.01% probability of occurrence. These events are becoming more frequent. So again, more reason to work with our the partnership we have to give better heads up ahead of time. And then even tropical storms, where maybe you're not seeing these same rainfall rates, these intense rainfall rates, but you can still see 1 to 2 inch per hour rainfall rates for a long duration, and sometimes see 15-20 inches of rain with an upcoming tropical systems that hold so much moisture in a short duration of time. So just, in terms of what are the products, similar to coastal flooding, we have watches and warnings. Flood watches, when we see all the ingredients are coming together for a potential hazardous, threat to life and property type of flooding event, that's when we'll issue a flood watch. So if you hear a flood watch, you want to be situationally aware, and it's in effect for our area, that there's potential for life-threatening flash flooding to occur. And then as the event's unfolding, we're looking at radar information, observational information, getting information from our emergency management about what's going on, but really looking at a lot of satellite radar observational information to really make a sense of how much rain is falling, how quickly is it falling, what are the rates, and then what is it translating into runoff? Is that being held by streams, or is it being run off into the community? And so if it's more of a nuisance level, we issue flood advisories, but you want to pay attention if we issue flash flood warnings. And the one good thing is the flash flood warnings mean that it's an elevated threat to life and property. But we have 3 levels of flash flood warnings as well. Base are like kind of the most common, where we're looking at, you probably, and these are some pictures, you may have underpasses that flood. You may be seeing a little bit of some flooding into basements, some road closures, things like that. May even have, a rescue here or there that needs to be made. But once we start going up to these next levels, considerable, and then there's the flash flood emergency, the catastrophic, those are the ones we want to pay attention, and you get more attention to it because they get alerted on your phone. If you get that flash flood warning on your phone saying that there's a flash flood emergency, giving you information on what's happening and what to do, and normally it's get to higher ground, that means this is a more rare event, more widespread, a higher threat to life. As that threat to life increases, that's the time when you'll get these alerts on the phone. And so, just wanted to kind of make you guys aware of it, just kind of an example of this. And the highest being these catastrophic flash flood events. We're seeing everything coming in. We want to give some heads up in terms of the radar information we're seeing, the reports coming in. We want to give a heads up that this is going to be an emergency level event, and that's when we issue these catastrophic flash flood emergencies. Really high-end wording. Ida was the last one that we had for your area in terms of a flash flood emergency. And then you'll see it on your phone come across saying flash flood emergency. You want to get to higher ground. You need to take it that into your own hands. But just some more information, links that you can follow to get more information and follow our forecast. But as Joe was saying, we do provide weather briefings right to our emergency management officials so they can make decisions, and they, I'm sure, are disseminating this information out to the community. And then it's really the partnership that helps us to really amplify the information and really to help work together to kind of make Greenwich weather ready. So Joe, appreciate the time and appreciate you guys listening. If you have any questions, I'll throw it back to Joe and see how you want to take this.
Thanks, Nelson. I appreciate it. And, again, we appreciate your partnership and working with our team. Because Nelson's on Zoom and we're going to be going to more of a live speaker base, does anybody have any questions for Nelson at this point in time that they'd like to ask? Yes.
How localized, from a geographical perspective, are the forecasts that you're getting? Is it just Greenwich? Is it Fairfield County? Is it vary by event?
So Nelson, I don't know if you heard that, but how localized are the forecasts? And I could speak a little bit to that, and I'm sure Nelson could elaborate, but Nelson's team's actually able to give us spot forecasts as necessary, as right down to Greenwich when we need it in a case of an emergency, in the case there was a hazardous material situation, or something that weather could potentially impact. Him and his team can come right to the pinpoint of Greenwich if needed upon our request. But I'll let Nelson kind of talk about what else they do localized.
Yeah, you know what, and so there are challenges to getting really down to a specific scale. Like I think a community scale, that's certainly and it depends what variables you're looking at, and what time frames you need this information. But generally we can get you, and you can go to our website. You can get a point and click forecast, and there's some good skill in there in terms of wind direction, temperatures, general precipitation. Sky cover, things like that. Now, if you want to know, 3 days ahead, is a thunderstorm going to hit my area, and what kind of rainfall rates it's going to have? Some of that's going to be shorter duration. To really get that specific down to a town. Sometime in terms of the predictability of something like that may not be until really maybe an hour or a couple hours before the event, or sometimes as the event's unfolding, because little differences in terms of where a front is, or just it could be a little sea breeze boundary, things like that. Those are not predictable at that scale, but depending on if it's snowfall, we can kind of give generalized amounts, even a few days in advance, and then we would have to refine it as time goes on. But as Joe was mentioning, if there's something, say a dispersion of a chemical, we can provide information, pretty specific information, for that community level. Based on the wind direction, things like mixing heights, what is the chemical that has been released. So yeah, it all depends on time scale, what the element is, and what specificity of information you're looking for. But we definitely check out our website, and you can see the variety of information that's available at different scales.
Great, thank you. Any other questions for Nelson? Yes, sir.
Had that Hurricane Lee not veered course, how catastrophic would that have been for this town?
And had that Hurricane Lee not veered course, how catastrophic could that have been for this town, was the question.
Yeah, you know what, Hurricane Lee, still when it got up to our latitude here, was still an 80-mile-per-hour hurricane, and a large one at that. So when you talk about a large, first of all, we haven't had a hurricane landfall in our area in 40 years. And the closest storms that we've had to, hurricane force in terms of wind speed. So, and we're talking about multiple factors. We would have to deal with destructive winds potentially. Isaias was the last one, and that was a mid-grade tropical storm with gusts to hurricane force, versus where you had winds in the 50 to 60 mile per hour or 50 mile per hour range with gusts to 70, 80. What you would look at with Lee would be in sustained winds somewhere in 70 to 80 mile per hour with even higher gusts. That would have done a tremendous amount of tree damage and infrastructure damage. Probably looking at, on the order of, maybe 3 to 5 times more damage than what we saw with Isaias. It's really more exponential, logarithmic than a kind of a linear when you're looking at that increase in winds. The other thing is, when you're talking about a large storm like that, it had made landfall. A lot of the surge with this storm is going to be on the east side as those winds are rotating counterclockwise, where those winds are kind of, and that wave action is oriented with the direction of the storm. If this had made kind of a more direct landfall, say on Long Island and then into Connecticut here, we could have looked at a really tremendous amount of storm surge. You're talking about probably levels that we saw with Sandy. So it's a big deal. If we and that's why we try, even low probabilities of being affected by hurricane force winds, or low probabilities of 3 feet plus, so life-threatening storm surge, we have to take really seriously, even several days in advance. Low probabilities mean there's also a higher probability of false alarm. But the thing is, if we don't prepare for these low probability events that could hit us, the chance of loss of life is also greater. So I would say if this had hit us, it would have been a much different story. We probably wouldn't be sitting here doing this flood symposium right now. We would definitely be in the repair, kind of recuperation measures. Because again, it's been 40 years, Hurricane Gloria, since we've had landfall here in Connecticut of a hurricane. So I think it's something that each season we need to prepare for, working together with our communities, and Joe and the team at Greenwich. I think that's going into each season. That's a big thing.
Great, thank you, Nelson. Any other questions? Okay, Nelson, I want to thank you so much for being part of tonight's program. Love to have you stay on if you're available. We understand you're busy. Thank you for taking the time tonight to meet with our town, our residents, and our colleagues here at the town of Greenwich. And we appreciate your partnership, and I know I'll be working with you a lot more in the future.
Sure thing, Joe. Appreciate the opportunity again. It was excellent talking to you, and you guys have a great resource in Joe and the team there. If you do have questions, and you can always funnel up to me, and we'll be happy to answer. So thanks again, and I'm sure we'll be talking, Joe.
Thanks again, Nelson. Appreciate it. Take care. All right, that was great. And part of my job as the emergency manager is to communicate, coordinate, and educate. And so I have the opportunity to help put together these types of programs so we can learn from technical experts like Nelson and bring our resources to events like today. So I do really appreciate him being here. Just to talk a little bit about our procedures here is when Nelson kind of gives us indication that there is a storm brewing, last week, it was about 9 days prior to the potential landfall that we were actually communicating, the first selectman and I, as well as the town departments. We're getting information for Nelson, and we're sending it out, saying there is a potential that we may see some kind of event. And so our team is able to start to already respond and go through their checklists and start to take actions. That's usually a good time for you as homeowners as well. If you start hearing on the news, that we may potentially have a storm coming in, these are good opportunities to maybe check your supplies, make sure that your generators are running, make sure that you have your emergency kits ready to go, make sure that you have your plan ready to go. We should be ready to go all the time because we never know when an emergency is going to happen. But we know that sometimes we forget and we're busy, but we should really take those opportunities to really go through your kits and make sure that you have a plan. Part of tonight's program will be talking about the plan with the Red Cross. We do want to talk about a couple of mitigation strategies for homes that, maybe see some water occasionally. Water, as you'll hear later, it has no boundaries, and water will penetrate and damage homes, no matter if you live by the water, by a stream. Sometimes there's some simple things that we can do as homeowners and to keep our houses and our homes and our families safe. We always talk about making that plan. I know every fall, my plan is to go out and clean my gutters and my downspouts because I know that each spring and each fall I have a lot of leaves and little debris that fall into my gutters, and always at the most inopportune times I'll see water coming over the gutters. That's a bad sign. That means that if ice starts to form, I have a potential that I'm going to have a leak in the home, and I'm going to have flooding in my basement potentially. So those are opportune times for me to go out there and take some steps to probably mitigate some of the problems. Some of the things else you can do as homeowners is raising our utilities. If we know that we're in a flood zone, or if we know we've seen water before, we could take steps to raise some of our utilities in our homes or outside our homes. And we can do things like wet flooding, proofing our homes, which is essentially installing systems that allow water to flow in and flow out. This are in, very wet areas that have a lot of problems. But again, we're all about life safety. We're all about protecting your property. And there are some steps that you can take to do so. Simple waterproof bins, keeping the things that you have in your basement in $7 plastic bins versus cardboard boxes could be the difference of you losing memorabilia or different types of memories or different types of personal belongings. And sometimes we just need a little reminder for those types of things because we all have a tendency of forgetting. We also have different methods like dry flood proofing, which is essentially barrier devices and different types of devices to block water from getting into different entrances into our homes or maybe into our driveways, into our yards. And we could take different steps with different types of products on the market to actually create barriers and force the water away from our properties and away from our yards. Yes, this is me outside my house, and my wife was so gracious enough to take a picture. It's a simple procedure of purchasing a $15 device on Amazon, and that I can reach my gutters to keep those clean to hopefully prevent some flooding at my house. Unfortunately, this is the storm drain in front of my house. I do not live in Greenwich because Greenwich has amazing DPW and amazing public works. But we just had a recent storm, and in the town that I live in, they do a great job too keeping these storm drains clear. But it is my responsibility as well to try to help them. There's a lot of roadways where I live. I'm sure there's a lot of roadways. I know there's a lot of roadways here in Greenwich. So if you have storm drains in front of your homes that may be filled with debris, we want to actually try to clear that. And that will alleviate water backing up into your driveway and maybe rolling down into your garage. Simple steps. A lot of times we have contractors that are working at our home. They may not take the same steps as we would as homeowners. They may be blowing things out in the roadway, leaves out in the roadway, debris. I actually live on a hill, so everything is rolling down the hill at my house. So we want to clear those storm drains. If we know we have a wet basement, or if we know we live in an area that's, traditionally wet, we can have different types of products like sump pumps that we can have professionally installed to really try to mitigate the water before you have a major flood in your home. And we have different methods like sandbags and different types of products out there that these bags are actually reactive to water. So as soon as water hits them, they expand and they divert water away from your home. So there are different methods to do that, and I'd be always happy to give you more information. As a reminder, you should always listen to those weather updates. The National Weather Service, along with FEMA, has done a really great job of having emergency alert systems that will ring to our phones in the event there is a catastrophic emergency that's pending in our area. We also encourage you to register for Greenwich Alerts. Greenwich Alerts is a new system here in town that we can notify you in the event of an emergency. This system, though, it's important to know that it will not be used to communicate about parking bans or events that are taking place in the park. This is solely for emergencies. And I mention it because somebody had a great question the other day. They said, Joe, I haven't heard anyone call me on this emergency alert. Does it work? And I said, well, thankfully, we haven't had to use it yet. But it is an emergency alert system. So you can go ahead at your convenience, greenwichalerts.com or greenwichalerts.org, and sign up for Greenwich Alerts. Listen to the authorities. If you're being asked to evacuate because there is a coastal flood warning, or if your area is expected to flood, and they ask you to evacuate, please listen to those evacuation orders and evacuate. Knowing where to go. We have a number of emergency shelters in town. Our Red Cross is one of our partners, our Public Health Department, our Human Services, and our Emergency Services team would be ready to stand up an emergency shelter if we had to evacuate people. And those shelters are identified at the Western Civic Center, Eastern Middle School, Central Middle School, and Greenwich High School. So those are 4 identified shelters in case we ever needed to open an emergency shelter. And if your neighborhood floods, please only return back to your neighborhood when it's safe to do so. Our emergency responders are going to make sure that it's safe, or our engineering team from the town is going to go out and make sure that homes are safe to reoccupy, and we don't want anyone to get hurt after a flood. Again, my job is to help coordinate, and by no means am I an expert in every area here. So what I like to do is invite the experts. So tonight we'll continue with some other experts, but first I'd like to answer a question.
Hi.
Hi.
So what if you do all those steps? I clean the catch basins every day, we have sump pumps, lived in my house for 30 years. Never got water until the town approved condos coming in with a 12-inch pipe that it's ending up in my basement.
Sure.
And that's the pipe is that we do everything on Rippewamp Road to get rid of the water. And we've done all we can, and it's a matter of the town making a 12-inch pipe, getting a bigger pipe in. It just doesn't seem to be happening, and we just keep getting the runaround and runaround. We've done every single thing possible.
Sure.
And we didn't get water until the last 6 years when condos were put here, condos were put here.
I understand, and you know, and we talk about those infrastructures and pipes and the development and things of that nature. I know our DPW team, and I know the town has been working with a lot of different neighborhoods and residents. You know, my job is to help prepare and to do everything I can, and I'll be happy to sit down with you after the meeting and see if there's anything I could do to help with that process. So I know there's sometimes we take all those emergency steps to try to prepare, and I'm sure it is. But
Because we have a lot of, many generations in town, and we know a lot of people. My dad's a septic guy, and we've given town proposals for our street. Everyone has issues, but for our street, to do things, and the town won't even, we've offered to dig it and then have the town come in and put the pipe in.
sure.
And it will be solved that way, but nobody wants to help.
Well, let's talk tonight after tonight's,
Okay,
and
absolutely.
we'll see how we can help you.
Thank you.
And, but, any other questions? Because I'd like to start to turn it over to Beth Evans, who's our Director of Environmental Affairs, and she's an expert in conservation. And Beth, I had a question first. Sorry, sir.
Staying with the theme of mitigation, and first off, you mentioned raising houses.
Sure.
FEMA last year allocated $400 million for individual flood risk projects.
Correct.
That's elevations, acquisitions, mainly. They released the results of NOFO a few weeks ago. And several states were very successful. Louisiana had a $140 million allocation. Texas, Florida, New Jersey. Connecticut didn't have any because Connecticut never applied for it. It's geared towards houses that are repetitive loss properties insured by the NFIP. Greenwich is 145 of those. They have 18 severe repetitive loss properties. That's what it's designed for. I don't know if you're insured with the NFIP. But the question is, the Department of Emergency Management and Homeland Security, DEMIS,
Correct.
cannot forward the applications to FEMA if they never receive them from the municipalities. And the municipalities, even in coastal, in years since Sandy, aren't particularly sensitive towards that type of grant application. And I think it's a great part because of the experience in handling FEMA grants after Sandy.
Yeah.
That can be done. But it won't
That's correct. And we work directly, very closely with the Emergency Management Department. That's actually been one of the topics, is these different types of FEMA flood grants that are available. I actually work very closely with Sarah from Liz's office, and we were talking about just that and the different types of grant programs. There's been a lot of emphasis on flooding over the last couple of years across the state. And so we could do our best as emergency managers to try to represent, the towns that we are working, with, each day. So, I'd be happy to get your information, and we can sit down and we can talk about, what opportunities there are out there for you and for the town. That would be great. Thank you. And First Selectman.
Yeah, Joe, and that's following on the gentleman's. We put out for every single thing that comes our way, and I went on a WestCog meeting the other day, and there were some grants there, but it was really restrictive to who could apply for them. Greenwich really didn't come into that, these ones that were available that day, but we're still looking. I reach out to the congressman's office all the time. They're on the lookout for it. But usually the ones that we talked about the other day a few weeks ago, were just restricted to communities that are underserved, and Greenwich was fitting into that. But we're so constantly looking out for those grants. Yeah. Yeah. After. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. Oh, no problem. Yeah, we'll pass around the mic, and thank you very much. I'm new to this room, so I apologize.
It's being recorded in the audience.
Oh, they can't hear. Okay, I'm sorry about that. All right, I'd like to introduce Beth Evans. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Joe, and good evening. I am going to talk very briefly about FEMA, very briefly, mostly because, as you all know, the catastrophic floods that you've been hearing about are the ones that FEMA tends to deal with. There is a handout over there that I made, which has FEMA website on it. You can look up to see if you are in a flood zone. Some of the maps have been recently updated. It's very simple. The website is on the handout. Simply go there, fill in your address where I've highlighted, hit search, and you will be able to figure out where you are relative to FEMA flood zones. That said, Nelson talked about catastrophic flooding, talked about coastal flooding, talked about riverine flooding. I'm gonna get a little personal. I live in Bethany. I live in a pretty rural area, and I live at the top of a hill. I think the elevation at my house is 654 feet above sea level. So I don't have coastal flooding. I don't live by a stream. And during Irene, to my shock and amazement, I went down in my basement and I had 2 feet of water. I had water shooting up through the slab in my basement. It was about 18 inches high. And I thought, whoa, where is that coming from? It wasn't a river, it wasn't a tidal surge, it was groundwater. The water we don't see, the water that is all around us all the time. Some of us have surface water wells that go down and tap into bedrock aquifers and groundwater that's way below the surface. Some of us live in soils that have what's called a dense layer underneath, and the groundwater there is perched. It's much closer to the surface. That's my house. What happened during Irene, at least at my house, we had 8 inches of rain in 6 hours. And it happened, as you, I'm sure, remember, in August, a time when there hadn't been much rain, so no one really thought much about groundwater. And that rain came down, it filled the soil pores, it filled that soil up just like a kitchen sponge. And it got to a point where the soil didn't hold the water anymore. It couldn't run off fast enough. The groundwater simply came up and flooded my basement, my neighbors' basements. Obviously, it flooded a lot of other areas. You are probably aware of all the damage it did up in Vermont. I called my insurance company, and my insurance company said, sorry, it's groundwater, it's not covered. So I got to deal with 2 feet of water, no electricity for 2.5 weeks, and a situation that I certainly didn't want to have repeated. So I guess my take-home message in all of this is I learned very quickly to watch the weather forecast, to watch the long-range weather forecast. Here in Greenwich, we typically, on average, get 3 to 4 inches excuse me, of rain in a summer month. 3 to 4 inches of rain is average. We have been getting storms come through that are dumping 2 to 3 inches of rain in a day. They're dumping 5 inches of rain in a week. The soil can't accommodate that. The groundwater is going to rise, and the flooding issues, the surface flooding issues that you're seeing are going to get worse. So my suggestion to you as homeowners, look around your property. If there are places that you can divert water off that's coming from roads or streets or down your driveway, do so. If you can put in a sump pump, do so. We ended up putting a curtain drain all around the inside of our house, and we have not been flooded since, fortunately. But it's not just the water that the National Weather Service tells you about, but the water that's accumulating in and around your property that can cause flooding and property damage for you. If you have questions about soils, questions about topography, the town has an excellent GIS mapping system. We have resources in our department, upstairs, second floor. We'd be happy to help you see if your house is one of the ones that's likely to have groundwater issues happening to it. That's really all I'm going to say. I'm here more to say it's not just the water that runs down the river or comes in from the ocean. It can also be the water that comes up from below. So, questions for me before I scoot off? I managed to keep my voice going the whole time. That's good. Joe?
Thank you so much. Okay, next we're going to actually hear from Ronnie Rosh, and she's with a Gallagher Insurance Company. Megan D'Amato unfortunately was not able to be with us tonight with a family commitment. But Ronnie, thank you so much for coming down to talk about insuring your home and some of the things, and just watch your step. Right?
Who doesn't love talking about insurance, right? People ask me what I do for a living. I say I make insurance dreams come true. So just a couple things. I am the broker for the town of Greenwich. I have been at Gallagher for 20 years this Saturday. And I partner with Megan D'Amato in the placement of insurance policies and risk management services. And she wanted me just to talk about flood insurance a little bit tonight. And I'm going to add to some of those stories you were talking about. So when people go and purchase insurance, the first thing they think about is fire, right? Fire is so scary, you don't want your house to burn down. But insurance carriers pay more in flood insurance claims than they do for claims arising from any other peril. So flood is a big thing. And we watch the news all the time. You know, I always say Mother Nature's on a tear, right? There's hurricanes, there's floods, there's wildfires, earthquakes, tsunamis. I mean, it's just really getting out of, well, I shouldn't say out of hand, but so property insurance carriers are reacting. They're pulling back coverage a little bit, maybe sometimes a lot of bit. They're increasing deductibles and increasing rates. So when you think of flood, there's a couple things. It's not just rivers overflowing. It's seepage from the ground getting saturated. In addition to that, and Beth and Joe both lived on top of a hill, well, so do I. There was a severe snowstorm several years ago, and then all of a sudden it's 60 degrees outside. Everyone's outside without a coat. It's beautiful, right? going to work the next day, everyone's talking about the water in their basement. Not me. I live on top of a hill. I didn't even check, okay? I'm so confident because I live on top of a hill. Well, I get home that night, I'm looking for my husband. Where was he? In the basement pumping out all the water. So that's exactly what happened. The ground was saturated and it seeped through to our basement. So one thing I think is really important to do is call your insurance agent, call your broker, and you want to know what your flood insurance coverage is. You want it to include seepage. You want to say, does it include seepage? You want to know what the deductible is. What else was I thinking here? What you also want to do is you want to know what your windstorm coverage is. A lot of our clients mix this up. There's a hurricane and it's pouring rain out. Okay, so when a river overflows and goes into your basement, that's flood. But when the wind comes by and it blows your roof off, and then there's flooding in your house, you got that. That's wind coverage right there. So you want to make sure, and both of those are a real issue, so you want to make sure you have coverage for both of them. You also want to check your water damage limit, because that is typically a different grant. So if you have a pipe that bursts because of the weather, that's typically different. So you want to make sure that you have ample coverage for all three of those. So it's flood, wind, and water damage. And that's something, a conversation you should probably be having annually with your broker, because if there's a lot of catastrophes, the insurance company is going to pull back. They're going to send you like a 10-page notice of changes to your policy. No one reads those. Just call your broker and have the conversation. In the cases where you might not be eligible for flood insurance, you might be in a flood zone, you can go to NFIP, which is the National Flood Insurance Program. They can give you coverage when you don't have it, or they can also give you coverage for a deductible if you have a high deductible. So you have to pay less than a claim. The problem with National Flood is the limit for your house is $250,000. The limit for personal property is $100,000. That's not a lot. But if you had a $250,000 deductible because you're in a high flood area, you could fit that right in, right? And it would be more cost effective. And it will not cover anything in your basement at all through National Flood. So, you were making the comment. Get it off the ground, put it in rubber containers. So really, from an insurance standpoint, just talk to your broker, talk to your agent, find out if you have the coverage, the right coverage, the windstorm, the seepage. So when a loss does occur, if you hear on the weather that there's a storm coming, insurance companies know that too, and they will put out a moratorium on writing coverage. So you can't get flood insurance 5 days before flood. Right? So.
Did you say if you had flood insurance, it won't cover your basement being flooded?
Through National Flood, through the National Flood Insurance Program, it won't cover anything in your basement. But if you're with a Hartford, a Travelers, a Liberty Mutual, they will cover things in your basement. But some residences who are in a high-risk flood zone might have trouble getting flood through the standard markets, and they may have to go to National Flood.
Is Neptune flood national? Do you know Neptune?
Is Neptune a insurance carrier? Yeah. And just I'm licensed in commercial lines, not personal, but I know the coverage. So I might not know Neptune as a carrier. But it's a really important conversation you want to have. And I think you were a great example. Beth was a great example. You might not be in a 100-year flood zone, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't mean you can't have a flood. So I made some handouts for people. It talks a little bit about the coverage, things to do. I'll put them on the table. If you have any questions, I'm always happy to answer them.
Yeah, Ronnie, thanks. You mentioned that the standard carriers will cover in the basement. I would probably caution people and tell them to just check with their carriers, because I know in 2007, we had the flood insurance and we got wiped out twice. And they said it wasn't a living area, even though we got it because it was the basement. And I said if it reached the second floor, we all would have been dead. But they said no at that point. So I would probably make sure that, as you said, to have these conversations on a yearly basis to make sure your coverage is exactly what you think it is.
Yep, and that's a good point. And it's definitely excluded under national flood all the time, but a carrier could exclude it. So, and just ask your brokers, or anything we should be aware of. Is there coverage in the basement? Windstorm, all that kind of seepage. All right. Well, good luck. I hope no one needs to call their insurance with a flood claim. But if you have any questions, let me know. I'm happy to answer for any resident for the town of Greenwich.
Ronnie, thank you so much, and thank you for being here. She came all the way down from Hartford, I believe, to be here tonight, so thank you for doing so. All right, going to move on to Michael Long. Michael's the Director of Environmental Service here with the Town of Greenwich Health Department. So Michael, if you'd like to come on up. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Good evening. So yeah, just going to look at the public health side of these flooding events. First side being preparation. Generally with a flood, you're going to probably get some sort of power outage. So preparing your home and your food, mainly your refrigeration and freezer, either stock up your fridge and freezer, or stock up with ice and ice blocks, dry ice if you can get it, coolers, to be able to keep your food cold. You don't want to get sick while you're trying to clean up from a flood. But basically, a fully stocked freezer can stay good for 2 days, fully closed, fully stocked, fully closed. Refrigerator's not as good, probably about 4 or 5 hours before it's going to need something to get it going. And you can revert it to an ice box by putting ice in your refrigerator. Or break out coolers and break out your food into different coolers and ice as well, using thermometers. We have thermometers in a little white plastic bag over there if you'd like. Those are food thermometers, but they can be used for measuring temperatures in your coolers. And then even if you live on a hill, you want to keep your food storage off the floor. It's because you don't want to get invaded by the floodwaters. Floodwater is not sewage, but it's not much better than sewage. And so anything you have stored, you want to, if you can keep it up, keep it up. And then if you have a portable generator, after storms, we're always getting notifications from the state about cases of carbon monoxide poisoning because people aren't using their generators right. So the generators, read the instructions, make sure they're operating, get your fuel, but place them appropriately, not near windows, not near doors, but at least 10 feet from the house, and make sure they're working properly. Let's see, as far as, if it's a quick flood, as far as cleanup goes, it may not be that difficult a job for cleanup, but the longer things are wet, the less likely they're able to be reused. If it's washable, then that's a good thing. But if it's absorbent and not washable, like sheetrock, a splash of water would be fine for sheetrock, but a quick soaking could damage it. And you often see folks with a line of, when it gets repaired, you get 2 feet off the floor based on the amount of flooding that people get that has to get replaced. But as soon as you can dry it out, the faster it dries out, the less likely you're going to get issues with mold growth and odors and such. And let's see. If you do have food impacted by floodwaters, commercially canned food is considered waterproof, so that can be washed and sanitized. Same with, your hard surfaces, just need to be scrubbed down and sanitized. Sanitization can be a chlorine bleach solution, a tablespoon in a gallon of water for 15 minutes for canned goods. Taking the labels off, but then remember to get a marker and mark it up as soon as it's done, so you know what it is. You can have all these cans and have a potluck or a surprise potluck. And what else? Boiling water for 15 minutes, 2 minutes for boiling water, for the same sanitization process. We do have information on our public health preparedness webpage on the health department. We have a bunch of handouts there. And that's, as far as wells go, if anyone's on well, those can be impacted by floodwaters, depending on how they're constructed. A dug well is affected by simple rainfall, but drilled wells depends on whether how deep they are and whether the well cap is affected by the water. But there are instructions on how to disinfect a well on our website from the state health department. And septic systems would really only be affected based on, not having electricity to run your pump if you're on a pump. But otherwise, once the water recedes, you should have a functioning septic system. Any questions on any of that stuff?
Okay. Michael, thank you so much for being here tonight. I also like to introduce David Frasca from the Health Department. Thank you for being here as well. He's my colleague in emergency preparedness for the Health Department. We work very closely together on a number of different projects. So thank you very much both for being here. And we'd like to invite the Red Cross. Brian Gerber is the Senior Disaster Program Manager here with the Greenwich American Red Cross Office. Rebecca, his colleague, is here as well, and Stephanie, who just had to step out. We are grateful for you being here. Thank you for always being a good and great partner to the town of Greenwich. The American Red Cross is an invaluable stakeholder and resource and friend here in Greenwich, and we're very grateful. So thank you very much. I'd like to introduce Brian Gerber.
No problem. Good evening, everyone. My name, as Joe said, is Brian Gerber. I'm the Senior Disaster Program Manager. The full territory that I cover, just geographically, is Rockland, Westchester, the town of Greenwich, Connecticut, and Nassau and Suffolk County. Rebecca Torado, who is our geographical DPM for disasters in this area, covers Greenwich, Westchester, and Rockland. So we were talking about Lee, and we were discussing, about 8-9 days before, we were discussing shelters. I called Joe, it was the Friday before, and we were talking about, well, what are you thinking? Do you think you're gonna need support with shelters? So the Red Cross, when a natural disaster like a hurricane's coming, events like that, where we can actually pre-plan and pre-stage assets, we start planning a minimum of 120 days, so a minimum of 5 days before an event happens. It's more like 7 to 9 days is when we start those basic conversations and then get more into it. And what it is, and I think, Joe, you use a 120-hour timeline here for your teams. So a lot of emergency management teams use what's called the 120-hour timeline because it really gives us, okay, by this point we should be doing this. So it makes sure that we're not missing stuff. And in disasters, a lot of things can get missed because it is very busy and very crazy. I brought a bunch of different handouts a checklist for everything from floods and hurricanes, power outages, pets and disasters. How many people have pets here? How many people have a pet go bag for their pet in a disaster? So I'm going to stick with that. Normally during a disaster, all shelters will allow service animals in. It's by law, it's covered under the Americans with Disabilities Act. No matter where the shelter is, service animals are allowed in. Then when you get into comfort animals, pets, even though they're part of the family, it depends on what the building owners say. So you always want to make sure that you have in your go bag for pets, have the updated vaccination records from the doctor, from their veterinarian. Because even if it's not in the building and it's not what's called cohabitated, whether it's staying in the shelter, in the same shelter, it could be a different room in the building, and it could be the SPCA is running a kennel or something. So you want to have those records to show that, yes, my dog, my cat has been vaccinated, everything's good with it. And it's sort of like when you take a kid to the doctor, you get your yearly physical for them, same thing for the pets, and keep that in your to-go bag for your pets. You should always have 3 to 5 days worth of food. Same thing with medicine for your pets. For your own personal go bags, how many people have a list of their medicines that they take daily in their go bags? It's something you should have. It is crucial because during a disaster, your pharmacy may have been affected by that disaster. So maybe their computer network's not down. Red Cross, we have disaster health services folks that are on site and will help replace medicines that may have gotten ruined during disasters. So if you have all your information, it makes it much easier because it's a collaboration then that we could work with, especially if it's one of the national chains. Their networks are so great and their computer systems, they can go to any other CVS. Let's just use that one as an example. The mom and pops give that great service, but you also need your doctor to say, yes, that is the correct medicine. So I tell everyone, have it all written down, have it all on your phone. We all walk around with phones in our pockets now. Have all that information there ready to go. Some other things that you want to consider, and I didn't bring a full to-go bag, I just brought part of one, but let's see what we got in here. A little raincoat. What else we got? We all were used to these face masks. So these have been in go bags well before COVID. And it's not because of COVID that we had them in go bags. It was because during disasters, particles get in the air. You could have fires that have been caused and other particles. So this just prevents you from breathing those bigger particles in. A glow stick in case you're walking somewhere at night so people can see you. A whistle. This is actually a foil blanket that will keep you warm. A foil blanket. It's actually what they give to the runners after like the New York City Marathon. It's the same concept to control body heat. And this is just a little first aid kit. And then something fun. Always have something fun in your to-go kit because, you know, during a disaster, you don't know, you may be sitting in a shelter for a day or 2 or 3 or 5, depending on what's going on, right? We look at some of the storms like Katrina. It parked itself. Harvey parked itself over Texas and just dumped the water for days on end. People were in shelters for weeks on end. So you really want to make sure you have something fun also. You should always have in your to-go bag, usually I tell people 2 to 3 days worth of clothes, usually 1 to 2 weeks worth of personal medicine, just because you don't know when the pharmacies are going to reopen and stuff like that. If you have kids, again, they're going to want their electronics, and all the shelters will have charging stations. Well, yep, we set them up. Most of the shelters, if they don't have generators, we work with the counties and the towns to bring them in. And And Joe, I don't remember which ones we said had generators. Do you remember off the top of your head?
Our 4 shelters.
All 4 right now? Yes, so all 4 shelters that are identified for Greenwich, and they're not gonna all open at once, they're gonna open in stages. So we may say, okay, we're opening this one first, second, we may open 2, depending on the type of storm it's gonna be and what the impacts are expected. But that's all done in collaboration and would be pushed out through Greenwich Alerts. I think that's what we discussed. So you're gonna get notifications. That's why those notifications, those local notifications like Greenwich Alerts are so important and so critical. Other stuff that the Red Cross does, I mean, we have a lot that we do with disasters. So we're talking about big disasters, but there over 60,000 home fires happen every year in the United States. Red Cross responds to them. And providing for that family at that time, we're providing that care and that comfort when they're going through what is really the worst day of their life, most likely. Other things that we do, we have our whole biomedical group, and we actually, right here in Greenwich, we have a blood center at 99 Indian Fields Road. And we collect blood there, and platelets. What else am I missing, Ross? Plasma, thank you. So that's a state-of-the-art, brand-new blood center that just opened. We have our Services to the Armed Forces group that works with the military to talk to like if a service member, if they're deployed and their wife has a baby, the Red Cross is the only organization that can make that connection and get that message to the service member. And that doesn't matter where they're deployed, even if they're in a hostile area, they're still able to get those messages through. So there's a lot that the Red Cross does. A lot of our work is with Joe and other county and town emergency managers. We're always preparing. So yes, now we're responding. I actually was up in Maine because that's where they thought the storm was going to hit. I was up there for 6 days getting ready. But things that we're doing to get ready is we're opening shelters. We're getting feeding agreements in place because we feed everyone during a disaster. Our shelters, yes, they're for people to stay, but let's say you say, you know what, I don't want to leave my house. I know I don't have power. It's comfortable outside. It's 75 degrees, whatever. Don't have power, so I can't cook. Red Cross shelters are still open that you can come and get food. Or you need to charge your phone during the day. Come over and charge your phone. Our shelters are information centers. So we'll have information either from FEMA, from local emergency managers, or other folks that we can provide. When Red Cross opens a shelter, we don't get into politics. We're there to serve the people. So it doesn't matter if you live on this street or on this street, we're here to help you. And I think that's it, unless there are questions.
Thank you, Brian.
You're welcome.
And Brian, Rebecca, thank you so much. What a valuable resource and great partnership, and I'm very grateful for everything that you do for us each and every day, not only during disasters, but during our local fires and different types of emergencies that sometimes don't necessarily affect an entire town, but may affect an individual or individuals in a home or neighborhood. So thank you for what you do for us. Again, my job is to help coordinate these types of programs and help educate. I do remind you folks to please think about registering for Greenwich Alerts. Your family members, though we have emergency ways to get a hold of you through the state police, through the weather in FEMA, when there's severe critical information, it's still important to register so we can get critical information as to when shelters may be opening, where they're located, and in different types of emergency situations that may impact the town. I'm always available for each and every one of you here in town. Please refer to our website, greenwichalerts.org, greenwichalerts.com, where you can get a lot of great information about preparedness, flooding, FEMA grants, and all different kinds of other information. I do want to take this opportunity to thank all our colleagues and all our department heads and our partners for being here tonight. Jim, I'd like to introduce from Department of Public Works, thank you for being here. And we'll be available to answer any questions that you may have. I'd like to just thank the First Selectman Fred Camillo for allowing us to do this tonight, and I'd like to invite him up to say a few last words.
Joe, I just want to thank you for putting this together and all of our partners. This is something that's critically important to all of us. I also want to remind people that we have thousands and thousands and thousands of drains in this town. And before a big storm, we know the spots that usually flood. And DPW, Parks and Rec will go and check them. But we don't get to all of them. It would be almost impossible. So I'm going to ask all of you, and we'll put something out there, to just when you're doing your walk to the beach, or going to the beach, or walking around the neighborhood, going to the gym, walking your dog, take a look. And if you see something, you see that your drain is getting clogged up, just either take a picture of it or just send us in a note where that is, and we'll send somebody over there to clean it right away. It just takes a team effort, but there are literally, Jim, I don't know, 10,000 drains in this town? More than that. We could never get to them all. So, but with your help, we can find the ones that are clogged. So, again, we couldn't do it without Joe's leadership and DPW and everybody, all of our partners in health and all the other departments. And Beth, thank you for being here tonight and all that you do. So, thank you. And have any questions? We're here. I know there's a few people we're going to chat with after. So, again, thank you so much and be safe.
Thank you.